everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Omnichannel Marketer. This is your host, Kate Stevens. Today, I'm super excited to welcome Sydney Hamroff from Tony's Chocolonely. Hi, Sydney. How are you?
Hi, Kate. I'm good. How are you?
Good. So today, I'm really excited to kind of deep dive into the, retail distribution process, the strategy behind it, and how that's changed for the brand throughout, the time that you've been working there. But why don't we just, step back and, start with your own personal career and what led you to Tony's?
Yeah, definitely. So I started my career actually in e-commerce, so away from the direct retail brick and mortar space. I started at Walmart e-commerce and I was in a unique role there, but it's most similar to a buying position. And I worked in kids furniture there. So a bit of a pivot away from Tony's, but coming from Walmart, I knew I wanted to go towards a brand that was a bit more mission focused. And so I stumbled upon Tony's, which has a very strong mission to end exploitation in the cocoa industry.
Awesome. And what is your current role at Tony's? And then, for those who are not aware, tell us a little bit more about what Tony's is and kind of what the state of the brand looks like.
Yeah, so my role at Tony's is the manager of strategy and insights. I originally started as just a category manager, which in this space means that I was really focused on register sales. So everything from pitching to new retailers, analyzing our promotional strategy and pricing strategy, to thinking about what new flavors we were developing was falling under my sphere. And as time went on and the team was growing, I picked up more. So my new umbrella takes all of that, plus planning, forecasting, long-term planning, like 3 and 5 year planning, and a whole lot of other stuff that falls in between. And all of that is really important because Tony's mission to end exploitation in cocoa happens by selling more chocolate. The more chocolate we can sell, the more impact that we can do. So it's really important in order to sell more chocolate to be in front of people's faces. And that means being in as many stores.
And what does Tony's distribution look like right now?
Yeah, so we started in 2016 in the natural channel and just in a few doors in some really key retailers like New Seasons and the Fresh Market. Over time, we grew our natural business and we went national with Whole Foods in 2020. And since 2020, we've really been on this rocket ship scaling into more conventional retailers. So we've gotten into Albertsons, CVS, Target. We just launched Walmart nationwide, which is huge for us. And we have a couple more exciting wins on the horizon.
And how did the brand think about that transition from natural to more conventional? And, what does that mean differently for the brand?
Tony's originally started in natural because those were the retailers where we could tell our brand story. So they would really latch on to the mission focused as well as ingredient focused label that we have. So because we're a European chocolate, we happen to fit into the natural standards and we can be sold in all of the natural retailers, which made it a perfect fit for us because the buyers were willing to listen to our story and wanted to join in with us and make impact. So we started in natural, really gained our footing there, and that allowed us to have proof points for other retailers. So once we were national in Whole Foods, it became much easier to show how big of a brand we were, how much growth we were driving for the category, and slowly expand from there.
So, a large part of your role is working with retail partners and, showing them how Tony's can drive more value for them. So, could you take me through that process? I know you'll put presentations together. Take me through that process and, help me understand what their goals are as the buyer and, how you help them understand more about Tony's and, what those kind of goals and KPIs are.
Yeah. And I would say that looked a lot different during the two phases. So if we talk about pre Whole Foods National and post Whole Foods National distribution, that selling story looked a lot different. So pre Whole Foods, we were really selling on the brand. So that looked like a lot of video content. There's a Netflix special under Rotten that's all about chocolate, encouraging our buyers to go look at that, watch it, really understand the problems in the industry, and feel compelled to join along with us. And it was a small amount of proof points, data that the consumers were really loving it, but it was really selling on brand. And now that we have moved past that, buyers actually want to know what value Tony's is bringing. So we spend a lot more time now talking in numbers. That means how much growth are we bringing? How fast are the bars moving off the shelf? We call that velocity, or dollars per store per week. They also want to know if we're incremental to the set. So if they have to remove another brand's item to put Tony's in instead, they want to know that it's going to sell even faster and more than the rest of the items on shelf, because it's a lot of work in a supermarket to actually switch out the items. So they have to make sure that it's worth their while. We also talk about what kinds of shoppers we're bringing into the stores. So Tony's itself tends to bring a higher income, younger, really valuable shopper for our retailers. And that's important to them, especially in this omnichannel environment where they want to make sure that they're retaining people in store and not losing them to Amazon or other online partners. And lastly, we always talk about dollar opportunity. So, how much money will this bring to the retailer? Because in the end of the day, their goal is to make money. And we'll round out how much impact that money makes. So if you sell X amount of dollars, you impact X amount of farmers positively in West Africa.
And as you're thinking about kind of these different data touch points, what are the inputs that you have? Like where are you getting some of the data that you're putting these metrics together?
Yeah, we get most of our data from Spins and Nielsen when we're talking about what people are buying from the stores. That also allows us to contextualize the market for the retailer. So, talk about how big these segments are, whether we're talking about chocolate bars or chocolate pouches. And then we also use numerator data, and that's panel data. So, they scan receipts that people submit to them and provide feedback about who the actual consumer is. So, that lets us see a couple of really valuable pieces of information. One, who the shopper is, what their demographic and psychographic is. Two, it allows us to see the whole shopping journey of the people. So we can actually say the shoppers first went to Albertsons and then they went to Target and they actually purchased Tony's at Target because Albertsons didn't have an item that Target did have. And that allows us to sell Albertsons on that item that they're missing out on. It also allows us to compare brands so we can see how much overlap we have with other brands and how much incrementality we're bringing to the set.
Can you explain the concept of incrementality to me a little bit more?
Yeah. So in Numerator specifically, you can look at the cross purchase rate between brands. So you can see what percentage of time a consumer will buy two different brands or more than two different brands. So that allows you to say if you have a low percentage of cross purchase, that means that people are coming purely for your brand. So if we have less than a 10% cross purchase rate with all of the other premium chocolate brands, it means people are coming just because they want Tony's. And if you don't have Tony's in the set, they're just not going to buy at all.
Okay, that's really helpful. And who is your stakeholder at these retailers that you're like, who are you preparing these presentations for?
So when we prepare these presentations, oftentimes we don't even get a seat in front of the buyer. So I just prepared a presentation last week that was going to be submitted in order to try and get us a meeting. So oftentimes you have to prepare a deck that's really clear enough for someone to open it up, read it by themselves, and not have anyone from the brand walk them through what's in the deck. They need to be sold on it just from the slides. If you then get a meeting from that pitch deck, oftentimes you still don't get a seat in the room and your broker will pitch it for you. So they might have 10 to 15 minutes to sell them on the brand. And then they'll also be talking about the other brands that they manage. So it's not just your brand that gets a seat in the room. Once you become big enough, you do get time with buyers, but that, even for Tony's, is only happening pretty recently. So we'll sit down with the buyer once, twice a year to talk about performance, new items, how we're going to shake things up, what our promotion plans are for the next year.
And what's like the approximate size of Tony's at this point? Like, how big do you have to be to even get that kind of seat?
Yeah. So now, including our Walmart distribution, we are in 33,000 doors. And I would say we just started getting the seat at the table when we crossed 20,000 doors, especially with conventional buyers. We've been having conversations with the more natural focused retailers for a while now, but get time with a Target, CVS, Walmart, those are all more recent.
And, you know, post Whole Foods, how are the conversations the same or different with your conventional buyers versus the natural buyers? Like, are they prioritizing different things?
Yeah. So the natural buyers still want to be our first market retailers. They're willing to test our new products. We launched new product line this year called Lil Bits in January, which is a more snackable chocolate. And we see most of our natural retailers immediately buying in because they know that their shoppers love Tony's and that they'll be willing to try all these new products. With our more conventional players, we have to make sure that every single product that goes in there is going to be a winner. One, because their sets are much smaller, and two, because their criteria to keep those items in are much stronger. So the way we talk with those buyers is much different. They care a lot less about the brand and the marketing and a lot more about the numbers.
And, you know, you mentioned a couple of different numbers around growth, velocity, incrementality, kind of shifting to conventional. What do they seem to care the most about? And if there's, something in the presentation that you're like, I, really want you to take this away, especially because you're often, not in the room, what are they prioritizing first?
Yeah, I think two key slides that I always show are one on growth. And for that one, I do both dollar growth and percent growth because oftentimes, as a new emerging brand, you can have a really high percentage growth. That doesn't mean that you're bringing a lot of dollars to the category. So to be able to show both growth in dollars and percentages there is really crucial. If I have a little extra time, I also want to show that that growth is coming from velocity or how fast our items are moving out the door and not just by distribution, right? Because the retailers don't want your growth to just be from opening up 500 new doors. And then as soon as you're not opening up new doors, there's no buyers there. They want it to be from the buyers demanding the product. The second key thing that I always show is velocity or dollars per store per week. So I usually do that in a lineup of the items. So taking every single item that we sit on shelf next to and looking at how fast it moves through the doors. So how many dollars it turns every week and show where Tony's items fit in that ranking. Usually, if you're in the first 50% of the items, you're safe, good to go. If you're in quarter three, we call it, you got some work to do. And quarter four, things aren't looking as good for that item. So if you want to convince the retailer to bring in new items, they won't if you have items in quarter three or quarter four because they think that you already sold them your best bets. Why would anything new come in and do better than those?
So if your brand is in that position, what do you do?
One, you could have new, better bets. So, as an example for us, we launched the Everything Bar last year. It's the first bar in a few years that we've had that's actually gone to the top four SKUs that we have. So, using other scenarios, like this bar is our number 3 bar at Walmart right now, to sell it to other retailers proves that, yeah, we might have an item in Q3, but this new item is going to be in Q1. Like, being able to prove that you do have new, better bets is really helpful. It's also helpful to acknowledge that you maybe have an underperforming item and talk about how you're going to remedy that. So, if you're going to take on a new promotional strategy, shopper marketing, maybe spending on e-com, all of the different levers that you could pull at each retailer to get the performance of that item to improve.
So, yeah, I'd love to hear what levers that you have available as a brand to help on the, velocity performance, given that's, such a critical element of retailer success.
Yeah. First and foremost, price and shelf space win everything in terms of velocity improvement. So, being able to run a promotion and being able to have off shelf space always show the highest lifts in terms of units and dollars sold.
Sorry, you said off-shelf space?
Yeah, so that's like when you walk into a grocery store, there might be an end cap at the end of the aisle. That grabs shoppers' attentions, and we see lifts on that go really high, get an 80% lift in store
Wow.
that week,
Oh,
just
wow.
because you're off shelf. And
Okay.
then we see placements like front end placements. So those registers that have a snaky checkout and you're right there in the front, you can go way over 100% lift
Wow.
if you have those placements. So those we find most impactful, and you can hire people to help merchandise you and get you in those spots. But we've also seen a lot of impact using a more 360 marketing approach. So during our launch of Walmart this year, we had a ton of influencer postings. We used Ibotta, we used ecom and search, and had our products up on walmart.com for pickup from store. And we found that it had a really strong impact on Walmart, but also had
Everywhere.
impact on other retailers as well.
And that's not necessarily your traditional strategy. Is that correct? Do you have more of like a retail first? So there e-com is a small segment for you guys?
Yeah, ecom is a much smaller segment, and we have in the past spent on it where we can. Tony's marketing budgets happen to be more limited because we spend most of our money back into impact. So we have to be really careful about where and how we spend it and making sure that the tactics that we use are the most impactful that they can be.
And given you have that impact angle, how much do you think your consumer knows about that impact? Do you have a sense of, whether they're buying based off that or just like the product is good?
Yeah, we've done some surveying around why people are buying Tony's, and the first answers are always flavor, taste, fun, and exciting flavors. So people are buying for the indulgent chocolate first, and then we find that over time they start to learn about the mission and they keep coming back and become more loyal consumers because of the mission.
Makes complete sense. So, what, knowing what you do now, if you were early stage putting together a presentation for a buyer, what would you include in that presentation? And then what are other key elements now that you just want to make sure that you highlight that we haven't really dug into?
So early stage, it's hard because you don't have a lot of proof points about your own brand, although whatever you have is amazing. I think it's helpful to immediately establish yourself as someone who understands the category and understands the data. So even if you're not selling your own brand, just going to the retailer as a category partner and saying, here's what I see in the landscape. Here's what product types I see growing. Here's what flavors I see growing. And I'm going to invest in those. And I want to partner with you to see how I can grow your category, and can be super effective to establish that relationship with the retailer. Now that we're more conventional, what I see as most impactful is the retailers really want to retain their buyers. So they don't want to lose them out to other retailers. They do that through a whole bunch of different ways, but some of those include having the right items on shelf, having the right price, and making sure that they're all merchandised effectively together. So, where are they sitting on the shelf? Are they in the middle at eye level? Are the bars next to the pouches? Do you have our rainbow tasting pack, which is our prized sampler that we've proven if you have the rainbow tasting pack on shelf next to our bars, the bar's velocity actually goes up 15% because people are trying the chocolate through the sampling pack and then going back to buy the bars. So having those merchandise together is really important.
Do you see yourself as a educator on the category to your buyer?
We're just starting to get to that point. So really having the time now that we have at least 30 minutes with a buyer to sit down with them, we can talk about here's the total size of the segment, here's the piece of the pie that Tony's plays in, and talk about future growth. We bring them in on the conversation about innovation, so what they want to see from us in the future. And we really try to include them in on more of a joint business plan as we move forward.
And at the end of the day, how are these category managers like, what are their own success metrics? Are those the same KPIs that you're preparing for them?
Yeah, their metrics shift a little bit depending on what they're buying for. If they're a seasonal buyer, it's usually sell through. So they'll buy a certain amount of product and want to sell through a certain percentage of it. If they're a more everyday buyer, it's margin and dollars. So that's where we're also starting to talk to them about which items are providing them more margin, where they are willing to compromise on price in order to get more dollars and more strategic conversations like that.
And how have you and your team educated yourself on the best way to present yourself and all of the respective metrics to be successful with these buyers?
That's a really good question and an interesting one as we've grown so quickly because our team has gone from a little startup to a real established team within basically a year's time now. So, thinking about how we transform in our messaging and dialogue is interesting. We lean on our broker partners a lot to think through how we're presenting and what we're presenting. It's also been really beneficial to talk to counterparts in other aisles of the grocery store to learn how they've pitched, what's worked well for them and what hasn't worked well for them. Because, as we've spoken about a lot, the way you pitch really shifts over time, and your team has to be willing to adapt to that.
Awesome. This makes so much sense. Is there anything else in kind of your pitching, selling process that we didn't cover that you think would be, important for us to do so?
Yeah, I think new items we didn't talk about much,
Okay.
but it's important when you're going into a whole new category to talk about why you think your brand can play and do well in that category because retailers often don't want to take a risk on a category that you have no proof in. And if you miss one review, you miss a whole year worth of selling that new category and product. So when we think about selling new products, one, we test them in natural first so that we can really get those selling stories and show that they're performing against our competitors in natural. But two, you can also get some pre data before they're actually on shelf. So you can survey consumers, think about how the total market is trending so that you have some proof points and some reasoning that new item will do well more than just a gut feeling. Because the retailers are going to be conservative and they're not going to want to make a decision based on your gut that a new product will do well.
Makes complete sense. That's super, super helpful. Kind of transitioning the conversation a little bit. Actually, one more question before I do so. You have a lot of these different data sources at your disposal, and now you actually have, your own data from, the 33,000 different doors of distribution. If there was a magic wand and you could have other data, what would you want to like help continue to tell your data story?
Surveying data has been really valuable, and we can't get it all the time because you have to put together the survey and obviously pay for each one that you send out. But I think it's provided some of the most valuable feedback to understand why consumers are or are not purchasing. It helps us innovate on the concept, and it also helps sell the retailers on it. So, like the rainbow tasting pack example I gave previously, we know that most consumers are buying the rainbow tasting pack because they want to sample the item and because they're new to the brand. So that helps us know that that's a really important, actually, first item to get in there with your core set of bars because it'll bring a new consumer into the brand. It also helps sell it to retailers because